So today on the UK Doc podcast, the YOD pod, is Dr. Tash Binnie. Tash, thanks so much for joining us on your day off. And this is precious time because you people are very busy. So thank you.
Thanks for having me. No, never too busy. Very grateful to have been invited onto the podcast.
Well, you've already told me this morning that you've been out for a walk, and anyone who follows on your socials will know that walking is a thing for you, especially with your dog. Your dog who might make an appearance, I hear.
Yeah, he's currently fast asleep, sat on his little stool next to me. He can never be too far away from me. He always needs sort of, within a meter of me.
How is that as a dog that you can go for a walk and you have to come back and go on a podcast and he's just curled up having a little snooze?
Yeah, he's great, to be honest. He's a cockapoo, and they can be quite crazy, but he's a bit more poodle, so I think that means he's a bit more chilled. But no, he's perfect. He gets me out every day. Go
What's
for
his
a
name?
walk, get some fresh air. His name is Ollie. He's
Ollie.
yeah, he's just, his ears have perked up when he heard his name then.
He wants to get on air. He wants to get on the pod. Yeah, so like you're out and walking with Ollie quite a lot. Is that, to dive straight in, is that something that you kind of a big anchor for you in your life?
Yeah, 100%. I think like my relationship with exercise has been up and down over the years. Back when I was a teenager, I had an eating disorder, so my relationship with exercise was very toxic, to say the least. And then it took me a long time to sort of find forms of exercise that were good for my physical and mental health and didn't send me down a rabbit hole of sort of unhealthy thoughts. So I absolutely love walking. I find that when I'm walking, especially when we get out in the countryside, maybe not so much in London, although I do happen to live in a nice part of lots of greenery in London. But getting out in the countryside, it just clears my head. I find that my thoughts, my mind is kind of quite silent and not 101 thoughts racing around my mind, which quite often is the case for me. So yeah, I'm very grateful for Ollie, because without him, I don't think I would do that as much. I don't think I'd have the motivation myself, especially at the start. I think when you know that something is dependent on you and you have to go out, and even if at first it's not for your own benefit, but it's for, an animal, that's great. And I'm very grateful for that. But yeah, when it's a bit of a rainy grey morning, so I can't say it always feels what you want to do at first. But it's nice to get some fresh air and get out.
There's definitely something in that as well. And I think it's interesting the point you make about the city versus going out and doing walks in the hills or in the countryside, because I'm a big believer in nature, the power of just being in and amongst it. It's not easy though, is it, if you live in the city? And I know you could go for walks around the park, but there is something special about being out and amongst greenery and the natural world. And I know that I think it's Japanese practice of forest bathing, isn't it? Where they actually are very purposeful about going and being in the forest, and they call it forest bathing, which probably sounds better in Japanese, but I don't speak Japanese. So forest bathing it is. But even like that, coupled with the movement and the exercise, is so key. It's interesting, actually. I've sort of reconfigured my relationship with exercise as well, because when I was playing full time, exercise was the job. So it wasn't a release, it wasn't an escape. It was just part of the day to day. And I enjoyed it. And I probably was getting lots of benefits from it just by virtue of it being part of the schedule. But I never sought that outside of my work space, I suppose. And now being active and being physical isn't directly part of my work and my day to day. I have to kind of go and seek it out. And I'm thinking, well, what type of movement do I enjoy? And I chat to my wife about it as well, and she hates the gym. I've kind of never loved the gym. I'm like, oh, I don't have to go to the gym. I could just go on a bike ride, and that's giving me the same benefits. I don't have to go and lift loads of the heavy weights. And I think reframing that for me has been an interesting thing. Probably taking the competition out of exercise and kind of reframing where it sits. But I think some people struggle with that, don't they? Is finding something that works for them.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, that's so interesting. I think there's, oh gosh, you can tell I live in London. There's a very noisy siren. I think there's quite a lot of pressure to sort of stick at one form of exercise as well and like be really good at that. Whereas, I do all sorts. I play tennis for a couple of months when it's nice weather, and then I sack that off, and then I go for a few runs, and then, used to play hockey at uni. And yeah, I think there's a lot of pressure on people at the moment, and there's a lot of pressure to, you know, if you start running, then you should be aiming for a half marathon or a marathon.
Yeah,
Actually, if you just
I
want to
actually
run a
feel that.
five, if you want to run a 5K forever, that's fine.
Yeah, I had actually bought into that
Yeah.
journey of running in a way that, because I used to do sort of short, sharp bursts as part of rugby sevens, and I've
Mm.
never really done long distance. And then I'm like, oh, I should probably do a marathon because it seems like that's the thing that people do now. And I'm so bad at running, like I get it's 8K and I'm blown up. And I'm thinking, right, you need to get better at this. And I don't need to get better at it. No one cares. But it's just funny because we do live in a kind of we live in a society of comparison as well. And there's apps, Strava, great app for some things, but
Mm.
ultimately it is another app of comparison to a large degree. And then other forms of social media where we see what other people are doing. And a bit of us is like, should I be doing that? Do I need to keep up with everyone else and do the same things? How do you experience that kind of, I don't know, that pressure? Do you
Yeah.
experience that pressure?
Yeah, it's so interesting. I mean, I think for me, like when I was unwell with an eating disorder, exercise for me as well was something I had to do, and it was never a choice. And so, I mean, trying to get to a stage where it's a choice, especially I mean, walking less of a choice because I have a jog, but sort of, yeah, going for a run or playing tennis or something. I think getting to a stage where you just want to do it. And I think the other thing for me is, I think I've never been very good at doing things that I'm not good at. I think being a perfectionist, I am quite not scared. Scared feels too strong a word, but veering towards being scared of doing things out of not failings. Again, that's too strong, but just not being very good at it, and being worse than other people. That comparison, which I think is really sad, and is something that I'm still, I'm only 25, but something that I'm still trying to get better at is being okay with not being really good at things and just
Yeah.
doing things because I enjoy them, and they're good for me, whether that be my physical or mental health. I think we do live in a society of perfectionism, and I think it's really sad because I think it does mean that people are not so up for maybe trying new things later on in life, or doing things because that's not what, they're really good at, or that's not what they're known for. So they should just not do it. Yeah.
Do you think that's particularly common, that experience that you have? And I actually have the same thing. Do you think that's common amongst healthcare professionals and doctors because it's a profession that demands a lot from you and you have to be you have to have a lot of attention to detail and you have to get things right more often than you get them wrong?
100%. Yeah. When I look back to being at sixth form, and even, preparing to write my personal statement to get into medical school, you obviously had to be academic, but then you also had to have like one or two other things that you could write about, was head of the orchestra or was captain of the A team. But, you obviously were never encouraged to write, I played wing defense in the C team of the netball team,
Yeah.
which was me.
I loved it. Like
I might have loved it.
another thing.
I might
Yeah.
have loved it. And, I might have actually gained a lot from it, which would make me a good doctor, like team playing and, a whole other load of things. But it's so interesting. So I think from then, really, that was probably sort of instilled in me that only do things if you're going to be, you're going to be really good at it. And I think that's the same definitely for every other medic. I would think you'd be pushed to find a medic that didn't sort of relate to some of the things I've just shared. So you kind of have to, and even throughout medical school, I really noticed that people were doing things but they were doing them because they would look good on their CV or their portfolio, we call it in medicine. They wouldn't do something just because they wanted to. Every time is precious, obviously, for everyone. And medical school is hugely demanding. So, in their spare time, they would be, you know, chairing a society or this, that, and that, or playing a sport for, because they were captain or something.
I guess it's
Which I
that
think
kind
is
of,
sad, and it's
yeah, it's that sort of means to an end approach, which can mean that we're always, I guess, looking at it from a broader perspective. We're always chasing something, so we're doing things because we're always looking at what that might lead to, and then that drags us away from the moment. I mean, just before we started recording, we were talking about schools, weren't we, today? And for young people, are we giving them? When I say we, I mean, I guess the system is the system giving them the chance to explore what they are passionate about and be guided by their interests rather than just thinking I better do this because of it might lead to this. And it's a really difficult one because the world is the way it is to a degree, and we all recognize that if we want to achieve certain things, you have to take certain steps along if you want to get to your goals. And I think that is valid. But to what extent are we sacrificing other things, I guess? And how aware are we if we're sacrificing our interests and, most worryingly, our well-being just because we're pursuing, this end goal? But I mean, you've got a lot of wisdom, given that you're 25. Remarkable.
That's
How
very
did you?
kind.
How well? I mean, it's great self-awareness, and I think the self-awareness is such a valuable tool to have, and I think it's a never-ending journey. I think the journey of self-awareness personally, but can you shed a light on how you kind of arrived at this place now and some of the bits of the journey that kind of got you to this point where you are a very impressive and self-aware 25-year-old?
Well, that's very kind. I mean, just to go back on what you were saying before, I think you hit the nail on the head. I think it is a balance, because don't get me wrong, there are times where I have to sit down and work on my portfolio, which doesn't end when you become a doctor, and tick boxes where, I could be making a banana bread or something. I've never made a banana bread in my life. I don't know why I said that, but you know what I mean? Like, it is a balance. I'm not going to come and say just go and do things because it makes you happy. Like it is a balance. But I mean, I've suffered with a few mental health illnesses which have probably helped me to get to where I am in some sense. I mentioned having an eating disorder, then more recently during medical school becoming unwell with depression and generalized anxiety disorder. And I mean, the first round of therapy I had was okay. Took antidepressants and got much better. But then I think it was probably a more recent round of therapy, about 18 months ago, where I recognized that although I wasn't unwell, there were still things sort of with how I behaved, how I reacted, how I coped with things that I recognized that I could improve. I was very grateful that I was able to pay for some private therapy, and I've hugely recognized that's not the case for everyone, very sadly. But that was amazing. And, it wasn't an overnight sort of thing where I, changed, but I think that definitely has given me the tools and made me aware of things. And as you said, it's a constant process. I mean, I think it was 18 months ago. Yeah, 18 months ago. So even 18 months down the line, are still working on those things. And it's not like I sit down and work on it for half an hour today. I wish that was the case. Don't have time, and I forget, and no one's perfect. But yeah, just sort of even in my day-to-day life, I think I previously never really understood how I felt, never really recognized what emotions I was feeling. And if I was feeling sad, I would blame myself and say, why are you feeling down? You have everything in life. You've got a roof over your head. You can afford to buy a new top from Zara. This is terrible examples, but you know what I mean? I very much sort of beat myself up. And even now I recognize that as a doctor, when I see patients be diagnosed with really sad things such as cancer, I think initially I catch myself being like, oh, why are you feeling sad? You're not the one being diagnosed with cancer. And then I'm like, actually, whilst of course it's, I can't even begin to imagine what that patient and their family are going through, and it's 10 times worse than how I'm feeling, I am still allowed to feel sad and not feel guilty about that. So yeah, I think, yeah, it's a constant process. I can't say it's any one particular thing, but just checking in with what emotion I'm actually feeling, and that helps me to understand how I'm reacting. And definitely talking to other people. I meet so many people that keep things to themselves, and I'm like, how do you do this? I'm such an oversharer, maybe too much of an oversharer, but I wouldn't have it any other way. My boyfriend might say differently. But yeah.
What initially kind of signposted you to seek help and seek professional help? Because as you said, then a lot of people don't.
I mean, I think when I was unwell with depression and an anxiety disorder, that's a bit of a mouthful. I sort of knew I was unwell and probably might have a mental health illness, but I delayed seeking professional help for well over a year, really. When I look back at things, there was a lot of it. There was some external stigma, but I would say the majority of it was internal stigma I had about being mentally unwell as a future doctor at the time, which probably comes from external factors, but definitely came from sort of how I viewed myself and sort of the perfectionist that I was at the time. But I think what finally pushed me over the edge to seek help was, I mean, one, it was probably seeing the effect I was having on my loved ones. So to start with, it probably wasn't for my own reasons, it was seeing loved ones. The second one was probably, again, not for me, but sort of thinking about future patients. And if I was going to advocate for them with mental health illnesses to take medication, to have therapy or whatever, how on earth that was so hypocritical of me if I couldn't do that myself. So those were probably the reasons at the start. And then, of course, as I, went into it, I realized I deserve to get better as well.
It's okay if that becomes top of the list at some but I totally get that.
Yeah, I mean, it's really difficult, and it can be challenging at the moment with getting sort of professional help for mental health at the moment. I have had mixed experiences with GPs on the whole good. And I appreciate that, as a doctor myself, I can't claim that every doctor is fantastic. And I'm sure there are patients that will like me as a doctor, and I'm sure there are patients that won't like me as a doctor, not because of anything bad I've done, but just, as humans, that's okay. So I recognize that some people, that's a barrier, but, all I would say is if the first GP or person you reach out to, the first therapist you see, doesn't work for you, that's okay. But don't let that stop you from, don't let that be the full stop. Let that be, okay, you're more than entitled to ask to see a different GP. You're more than entitled to even change your GP practice, and you're okay to ask for a different therapist. And, I can't say that therapy for me initially was, cured everything. It was a start, and I can't say that antidepressants were, like overnight I felt better, but the combination of those two things helped me to do all of the other things we know are good for mental health, like seeing my friends, which I wasn't doing anymore, like doing exercise and doing other things. So I've probably just rambled for the last 5 minutes, but I hope something was
No,
useful.
that's so good. And I want to go on to some of the things that you're doing to help on a broader scale. But staying with this, I think there's something fascinating about what you said about your natural human response in the environment that you're working in. Incredibly triggering environments when you're working with often extreme health conditions and dealing with human beings on a day-to-day basis who are very varied in the way they'll respond to things, huge number of emotions flying around, and yet there is and the expectation of the doctor to be the steely one. And I kind of want to dig into this because I agree. There's two things which could potentially sit in conflict. One is we're human beings and we have emotional responses to things. The other one, which I think is still valid alongside that, is there is a responsibility to try and behave in a certain way if it benefits other people. And I'm fascinated about how those two things can sit in harmony. And you're going to have a really good answer on this, I'm sure. But just putting it into my world, if it helps just to shed light on it. A recent example, the Tokyo Olympics, and I got injured in the first half of the quarterfinal, and I knew that I think subconsciously knew I was done for the rest of the tournament. Absolutely devastated, but still had to talk to the lads at halftime in the huddle. And I knew at that moment that if I wasn't able to reveal a different emotion other than some of the really devastating ones I was personally experiencing, that was going to have a detrimental effect on the team. Like, they didn't need to see me crying at the halftime huddle because they were still in the game and they were trying to fight and win it. So that wasn't going to be useful for them. So I tried to channel something that was different in order to give them what they needed in the moment. Now, I know that's quite a niche example, but it kind of sums up this kind of potential paradox, but also maybe there's a great, maybe it's just skillfulness. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I don't think it's niche. I think that's a really good example, and I can really relate to that in my own working life. I think it's amazing actually how we can be like quite resilient and strong in that moment. You know, I watched things on TV. I recently just finished One Day on Netflix. I don't know if you've watched it. I don't know if anyone listening has watched it, but oh my gosh, I was literally in tears for the last 3 episodes. And you know, I'm such a crier, which, you know, I think in the past I used to beat myself up about, but now I'm fine about it.
That's a cool thing, isn't it? The crying thing. I think I was the same. I know I never really cried. I don't know if it's because I'm getting older, but yeah, as soon as you give yourself permission, it's nice.
It is nice.
Anyway, it's the banking adverts at Christmas that get me, by the way. Banking adverts Christmas, they honestly get me in the field all the time. Sorry, that's a tangent. Carry on.
Yeah, but of course, in that moment, I don't think it would be appropriate, you know, if I mean, okay, I'm trying to think of an example, sort of a more recent example, having a conversation around palliating a patient and withdrawing treatment, you know, stopping antibiotics and things like that with the patient and the sorry, my Siri is just going off and there's a siren. Yeah, having that conversation with the patient and their loved one, and sort of seeing their loved ones very emotional, understandably, and I think if I was watching that on TV I would be in tears. But actually I've been surprised with how in that moment you are able to, you just don't. But having said that, I think afterwards, that day there was a few other things that had happened in that day as well, which I found really challenging. I went back to the sort of doctor's office where we work, and whilst I don't think I cried then, I spoke to a couple of my seniors and said, "Oh, I found that really hard," which was nice. A first thing that wasn't enough for me. And then I remember walking back to my car and had a cry and listened to some sad music, because what do you do when you're sad? I don't know if anyone else does. You try and make yourself feel more sad rather than listening to happy music.
Yeah.
And then I drove home once I stopped crying, and I spoke to my boyfriend about it a little bit. He's not medical, so I try not to burden him too much with the medical side of it, but just, you know, told him I was upset, and briefly for sort of kind of what reason. But then I called my friend who is a medic to kind of go through a little bit, obviously without breaking patient confidentiality, but kind of a little bit more of the medicine side of it, which was really nice. So I kind of had different points of people helping me who all offered like a different perspective, like from my seniors who obviously I've had a lot more experience of this, from my boyfriend, kind of the emotional need, and my friend as well, being like the same level of, you know, F1, and the most junior doctor there is. So that was really nice. But yeah, I definitely think, you know, I've posted about this on social media, and I've had some healthcare professionals, I think nurses actually say, you know what, I've cried with the patient. And I think in some moments that's probably okay. But for me, in the moments where I've seen so far, I don't think it would be appropriate, and I don't think it's what the patient needs. I think, of course, it's okay to say that, you know, you're extremely sad, and, you know, I think that's okay. But yeah, I've often thought about this when I see someone with a mental health illness as well. I mean, I don't think it'd be appropriate to be like, oh, you know what, I've had depression as well. Yeah. And it's now okay. I don't think that would be appropriate. However, if a patient comes across my social media and, you know, inadvertently sees that their doctor has had a mental health illness, I think that's great. But yeah, I think everything we're talking about it's all a balance, isn't it? Nothing's black and white. It's all quite a grey area. But I think just one final thing on sort of the doctor's emotion. I think there's another pressure on doctors that you can't be too emotional for the job, which I think is, I was about to swear, I won't swear. I think that's an absolute
I think we can
pile of
swear most of the
rubbish.
audience are adults. I don't know. There might be some child doctors listening, but maybe not.
Well, I was gonna say one that I don't want to say on the internet. But anyway, yeah, I just think that's rubbish. I think I was saying to someone was talking to someone on Instagram briefly the other day and saying, I think I've actually become more emotional since working, rather than, growing a stiff upper lip or something, I'm absolutely fine about. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, no, 100%. And I think probably in your profession, it naturally invites people who are very compassionate, as well as being, ambitious and intelligent and skillful and all the rest of it. There must be quite a large degree of compassion. I always think a lot of that, with compassion comes empathy, and you can't avoid the feelings that come with empathy. I really enjoyed you describing the strategies basically, and I think that's the thing. We have power over our response as long as we have strategies to back it up. Because if we're just not reacting in the moment and then not doing anything to allow those emotions to kind of bubble to the surface at any other point, they're just staying lodged down inside us, and they manifest themselves in other ways, and it's not sustainable. And I wonder if there's another thing as well around it, and I don't know whether this is a factor of your profession or not. It's probably something that is in sport, not enough, but that is sort of the purposeful and very deliberate practice of being skillful with our emotional responses. So, literally learning how your brain works, understanding how your natural response might be with certain triggers and certain scenarios, and almost like practicing how you respond in those moments. And I know that sounds straightforward, and it's not, and it is a process, but I am a big believer that we have the ability to develop our mental skills, i.e., develop and improve the way we react to things and react to stimulus. And I just think it's an assumed thing, especially among people who are successful in their professions. But being good at being a doctor doesn't necessarily mean you're skillful with your emotional responses. And I just think that I think a lot of industries would benefit from incorporating some of that training into their, regular practice.
Yeah, 100%. And I don't even think it's something that 6 years at medical school can prepare you for. I think it's very different when you're actually the doctor and involved in that patient's care. And, I've been in the acute medical unit for the last 4 months, which is very like rapid, short, fast pace, people are in and out kind of thing. But even so, you do still go on this journey with them. And yeah, I think obviously there's certain times where you have to protect your own well-being, and I don't want to say try not to get involved. It's not the right wording, but there are certain times where you do just find yourself protecting yourself and not getting so, I don't, emotionally invested is probably the wrong phrase again, but I'm sure hopefully people know what I mean. But there are certain patients and certain stories where it's just impossible, or anyway, for me it is, and your heart just goes out for them. But yeah, I definitely don't think it is weird, but suddenly one night becoming a doctor and suddenly you're the person having these conversations. You're not watching them, and there's not really, yes, medical school prepares you for it, but I wouldn't say it's not like a step ladder. It's like, you climb up one step ladder and then suddenly there's another one 10 meters up.
Yeah, I
It's
can
not
imagine. Well, I
really
can't
a
imagine actually.
gradual transition.
Yeah, it blows my mind how you kind of navigate that as an experience as a young professional. Like it's a crazy kind of jump to take, I suppose. And that's why I guess the emphasis is on the leadership. And I know you talk about this in your social media about the responsibility of senior members of the staff. But I mean, there was, I suppose, one thing that's probably interesting for people to hear, and I'm keen for your thoughts on it, is choosing which outlets you utilize. Though I was having a conversation with a colleague recently, and he said he's a bit old school, but he was saying that I think the phrase he uses, people don't want to hear your problems every day. And I think what he was getting at, without much subtlety, was, or what I took from that, was it's useful to choose your outlets wisely, because some people won't have space or maybe their own emotional capacity for your
Mm.
download and or offloading of your
Mm.
experiences. So I think if you, it's a good strategy to have like a certain number of people in mind, or yeah, I guess, you know, whether that's senior people, friends, loved ones, like you said, a couple of different outlets that you know are trusted sources and that have the capacity for it.
Mm.
And even, I don't know whether you ever do this, but I'm not sure if I ever have either, but it sounds like a good idea. Even checking in with people before you before you offload, like saying, "Oh, Tash, I actually
Yeah.
I could use some space. Do you reckon you've got the space
Mm.
for like 10-minute chat just for me to offload some stuff?"
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Yeah, I think lockdown one really taught me this. I went back home with my parents, and it really taught me, I'm a big believer in talking, as I said, but I think, yeah, I think there are things that we can all do ourselves, and there should be ways that, it's quite a nice feeling when you're not reliant on other people for your happiness as well as, going and talking to them when you're sad. It's a really nice feeling to know that you have strategies yourself which don't depend on other people in order to cope with things, which I definitely do now. I didn't before. I was always such a, needed such a, yeah, needing other people in my life all the time. And yeah, I think what you said is such a great idea, making sure that that person can talk, that the friend who's a doctor at my stage I mentioned, she's really good at that actually. She wanted to talk about something over the weekend but knew that I was working, so then, voice noted me last night when I wasn't, which I thought was really kind. And actually like was so needed, because if she'd messaged me that sort of when I was working selfishly, I would have, it would have been more difficult.
Mm.
So yeah, I think it's important. I think that's why it's important to have more than one person you can go to as well, because she may at that time really needed someone in that moment, so it's important that she could, she had someone. And yeah, whilst I mean there are levels to this as well, like if someone is in absolute crisis, then of course I would have been more than happy to be messaged when I was at work, of course, that goes without saying. But if it's
Oh,
just
also, you know,
something
professional services that are, or
yeah,
charities that are set up for people if they're in crisis, I think is worth
yeah,
saying.
100%. um but yeah, I think it's so important to be able to have ways that you can try and, process emotions and how you're feeling yourself, and or go and talk to someone as well.
Mm.
Because if you've taken that first step to kind of, blow off steam or just think, process things a little bit, and then you'll actually find that conversation is probably more productive. If I went to Alex, my boyfriend, in floods of tears about that situation, it probably wouldn't have been very great. But it's also okay to go to someone when you're in floods of tears, because sometimes that's what you need. But I think one thing that I was thinking about as well is the word resilience, which is something that I've had to learn kind of what it means, and I'm still probably just learning how I interpret that word. Because growing up, when we were talking about at school, resilience for me was very much like, in the sort of being a doctor, it'd be like, oh, you can't cry, you're not resilient if you're crying. Oh, you're finding that sad because someone's been diagnosed with cancer. Oh, you're not resilient enough. Which I think is completely wrong. But I didn't realize that until a couple of years ago. I think resilience is actually having the strategies to process our emotions, how we're feeling, and be able to think you're resilient if you can recognize how you feel as well. I don't think resilience is just pretending that you're not feeling anything. But I think it's so interesting how we're taught what being resilient means. It'd be interesting to know, like, kind of in the rugby world as well, like how, yeah, how that's
Yeah.
interpreted and things.
Well, I wonder if people would guess in an all-male environment, in a
Yeah.
kind of quite a high testosterone sport
Mm.
where old-fashioned or yeah, I guess old-fashioned masculine values
Mm.
do hold a bit of sway. You can imagine that resilience was not about showing emotion particularly.
Mm.
Um, and actually, I think that was one of the things I'm probably proud of over the course of my career when I was playing, is that I tried to create or help create cultures in our team that kind of fostered this vulnerability and
Mm.
saw resilience as let's experience what we're experiencing and then still be able to move forward, rather than
Mm.
let's ignore what we're experiencing and try and move forward, because that might work for a little while, but not only does it mean that you're probably going to be less robust when the shit really hits the fan, but also you're probably not enjoying the good stuff as much as you could do. And I think that's the thing
Mm.
that people often miss with mental health conversation is we talk about maintaining good mental health and having these strategies for the tough times, but what we probably don't talk about is the fact that um, maintaining ourselves also just fosters this brilliant enjoyment of all the good stuff that we've got
Mm.
going on. Um, so yeah, I think it has changed a lot in my experience in rugby and in sport. I think people are much more aware. There's a bit of a generational difference. I think that
Mm.
you've hit the nail on the head for people that in the modern conversation around mental health, I think there's a bit of pushback from some of the not just older generation, but from a certain group of people, because they think, oh, you're just sharing to lead on other people and to get help. But the point is, it is part of a rounded strategy where you're doing things to help yourself so that you can,
Mm.
and ultimately, as you said as well, so that you can be better for other people. Like, it's not a purely
Mm.
selfish exercise. And I mean, I think it's totally fine to want to feel okay and to want to feel
Mm.
fulfilled and happy. And but it's, part of the motivation is for other people, so we shouldn't forget that. Um,
Mm.
but on the subject, not everyone has an outlet for that they can go to, which brings it on quite nicely to Future Frontline, which
Mm-hmm.
is awesome. And you received the Diana Award for this, which is very
Mm-hmm.
impressive. Tell us a bit about how that came to be in existence as a project.
Yeah, it kind of goes back to what I was saying before about at medical school, there's this pressure to do things which are good for your CV. No one really ever does anything just because they want to. And I actively challenged all of this when I was unwell and starting to get better during lockdown one. And I just started finding out more about myself and what brought me fulfillment in life, which is sort of working as a team and supporting other people and leading people and making change and all of this. And so Future Frontline never started as something that the aim was never to win awards, was never to be something that now in hindsight is something I'm really grateful for, because it's given me loads of skills and things that I can reflect on my CV and other things. But that was never ever the motivation. But yeah, it came around in lockdown because, one, I recognized I had a privileged route into medical school, had quite a lot of support, but even so, still recognized that, it was very much top. My career advice was be a doctor, be a nurse, or be a dentist, maybe paramedic at a push. But like the rest of other healthcare professionals, like dietitians, speech and language therapists, physiotherapists, God, I had no idea what they were and who they were, and that they were careers. And also I recognise that, I mean, medical school is a long time, 6 years, and other healthcare degrees also are relatively long, and it's quite a challenging time. So I wanted to, one, inspire more people, people watching the news and inspired by what they were seeing healthcare workers do. So I want to inspire more people to become a healthcare professional, but, also to find the healthcare profession that was most suited to them and they were most likely going to enjoy, because maybe I would have enjoyed being a dietitian more than a doctor. Who knows? But also, to support people to gain leadership skills themselves, and also just to foster a more inclusive group of healthcare professionals. Like in the past, not so much now. I actually don't see any of this at work, but in the past, there was definitely a hierarchical system amongst healthcare professionals, of doctors being at the top and being these godlike figures supposedly, and then everyone else kind of being below them, which is definitely not the case now. But there still is an element, I suppose, of maybe there could be some more inclusive working. I'm actually fortunate to work in a hospital where it's great. But yeah, that was kind of the idea, and I've just been so lucky that grown a fantastic team of like-minded individuals, and we've had support from great mentors, and it's something that I'm so grateful that we're able to support young people and help other people. But also I really love it. Like, sad that I don't have as much time anymore to work on the projects and things, but got some great members of the team doing so. But yeah, throughout medical school, it just gave me such a great, it was such an enjoyable thing. You know, my boyfriend would be like, why are you working more? And I'd be like, well, it isn't work. It's just, it's, you know, something that brings me fulfillment. So yeah, I'm very grateful that you know, that project happened, and very grateful that it's still going on. And yeah, looking forward to seeing what other things that the team gets up to with it all.
You sound like the type of person that is, I mean, we've spoken about some of the motivations, some useful, some not, but
Mm.
you've done a lot in your young life. Are there things that you've got your eye on aside from your social media and continuing that and the work on Future Frontline? But are there other things in the pipeline?
There are. I mean, I think this year, actually, last year was a really exciting year for me. I like got invited to lots of talks and awards and things. It was quite, and obviously becoming a doctor, it was quite a big year. And this year so far feels a lot quieter. And initially, I was a bit like, ooh, it feels a bit of a downer. 2024 now, 2023. Everyone, you know, when's the next award coming, and when's the next talk I'm going to? I'm sort of joking, sort of not. Um, but actually, I on holiday the other week, and I was actually like, you know what? I actually, you know, I'm really happy and I'm in a really healthy relationship. I have my dog that's basically my child. I can't wait to get married in the future. There's no ring on my fingers at the moment. I can't wait to have children. And like I
Is
noticed
that
that my
the
motivation
least subtle hint ever that you just dropped? Hoping that your boyfriend's listening to this, or is that conversation you've had?
there's been more hints. Um uh but yeah, I think it's interesting. So whilst I do have sort of work related motivations, I've also noticed my motivations have changed over time to like incorporate other things as well. And whilst, you know, I'm kind of joking about those things, and I don't want them to happen anytime soon, in the near future, maybe. But work-wise, I mean, I was really fortunate to do, as a medical student, finding a medical student, you get the opportunity to do an elective, and lots of medical students will go abroad. But because of a number of reasons, I chose to stay in the UK, and actually did some time working with the shadow health secretary in the Labour Party. So I must admit, health policy, public health is something that this year has spiked my, well, end of last year and this year spiked my interest a bit more. Just I think working in the NHS, you see you're so far down the line in someone's health. You know, actually the NHS and especially secondary care hospitals make up 10% of that person's health. There's so many other things before it. So I think from that kind of frustration, and yeah, I'm hoping to something to do with health policy. We'll see. But also, yeah, yeah, we'll see. But I'm open-minded about yeah, what I think in the past, I think was very much taught that I should know like my whole career, what it looks like. And I think being a medic, I think in the past you kind of stuck at that career forever, whereas you know in other industries it's much more common to, you know, have a whole variety of jobs and things over your lifetime. And I think finally that's becoming more accepted in the medical world, which is really exciting. So I don't know whether I'll stay working as a clinical doctor forever. I might do, I might not. And being okay with the unknown is something I'm trying to, oh God, this is getting very deep now. But
That's the
yeah,
idea.
being
That's the
okay
idea of the yacht
with
pod, Tash. This is why we're here.
but yeah, being it's a Monday morning, it feels too deep. But yeah, being okay with not knowing what's around the corner as well is okay. But yeah, we'll see.
I hear that. I hear that. As someone who's just come off the back of a career which was always destined to end in my early to mid 30s, the unknown is, I'm surrounded by the unknown all of a sudden. And it's funny because, yeah, complete contrast probably to being a doctor where most people expect you to do it forever until you retire. Whereas as a sports person, you know there's a shelf life
Mm.
and you know it's going to come to an end. Um, and I've always tried to, as you say there, channel the benefits of that in that, you know, what an amazing opportunity to just pause, reflect, change, and do some completely new things. Um, but but there is the unknown, and the unknown is scary sometimes. And I think if there are people listening to this who are pivoting, changing career, it's probably time or potentially time, especially if it's change that has come about through other circumstances and not of your choosing, then you do have to lean probably into some of those strategies which we've talked about, lean into your community that you have around you, and not be afraid to be vulnerable. And certainly it's a great time in life to be aware of that voice in your head that says you need to be perfect at everything, because the chances are when you start something for the first time, you're starting afresh, you might not be the best in the room at it. And I think that's something that I'm probably managing at the moment, albeit I think I've come in fortunately with a decent bit of self-awareness around that. But that voice does creep in, that kind of that perfect Tom voice is there every now and again, and it's just you just have to manage it. So but yeah, I think it's great for people to feel the freedom to choose and to pivot. And if one day you decide, actually, I want to pursue something else, it doesn't make sense for anyone to be trapped in their job, because you're not going to be doing the best for the patients or yourself.
Yeah, and I must admit, I don't think I'm completely over. I don't think I've completely accepted that it's okay to not be a doctor. I think
I mean, you kind of have only just
there's
started though, Tash, to be fair. So
I have, but
I would
the
say your
current,
next career already, but
I mean, honestly, the current situation in the NHS and everything is yeah, sending me out fast. But I think there's still a lot of alarm bells in the sense that you'd be a failure, Tash, if you didn't stay working as a doctor. Oh, those 6 years of medical school is a waste, which I know that's all not true, but I'm still working on those thoughts. And I know I will get there if I do want to leave. And I know those thoughts wouldn't stop me from leaving, but I don't want to speak on here and pretend that those thoughts aren't still going around my head. And I know from speaking to people that have left medicine, they've obviously had those thoughts and they have overcome them. But yeah, I'm not saying that I'm completely over those thoughts at the moment, despite knowing they're not true.
I love
But yeah,
that
it's interesting how
authenticity. That's great. I value that. It's a nice
but
reminder of a phrase, one of my favorite phrases, which is "You are not your thoughts." I just think that's such a
yeah.
nice way of framing it, to make you curious about your thought process rather
Yeah.
than judgmental.
And our thoughts can be so powerful, can't they? And they can feel so true, and they couldn't possibly be wrong. But yeah, just that has helped me recently, actually, with I think my anxiety, probably since working, has been a little bit higher at times. I suppose naturally. Lots of people say that their job or whatever isn't life or death, but ours actually is. So there are times where I'm like, oh gosh, did I prescribe someone an antibiotic they're allergic to? And then you can, it's quite easy to get into a spiral. But actually just taking a moment and saying, well, just because this thought is going through my head doesn't make it true. And reminding myself of all the thoughts I have had in the past which have not come true is helpful as well. But it's interesting going back to hear you say, kind of in terms of like a sports person's career, and how it's there is a shelf life, like you said. Is there pressure as well to kind of know what you want to do, to have it all sort of lined up after you leave as well? I imagine there's a lot of pressure, like, you're going to manage a team now, you're going to do this, that, and that. I don't know. I
I
don't
think
know much about sport,
historically,
but
yeah, I think probably in rugby, certainly there was quite a lot of assistance and reminders as we were going through our playing careers that, you should set yourself up for life after sport, set yourself up. I guess what I saw more of was pathways into quite traditional job roles. A lot of them, one of the most trodden paths, as far as I could see, was like you retire from rugby and you go and work in insurance. I think that was a big one, and I was like,
wow.
I don't know if I want to work in insurance. So what else do I do? And there is awareness around it, and I thought I was quite proactive, and I knew I'd had an education to fall back on and to utilize, and yet I've come out the other side and I've got more questions than answers, for sure. And I think the problem is, and I was quite happy to go and work in insurance when I was 25, 26, looking ahead at retirement. But then, 7 or 8 years later, when I'm actually retiring, funny enough, quite a lot's changed, and I feel differently about life and about the world and about what I want to do in with my next career. So when we don't live in a fixed mind, and we don't live in a fixed world. We are, it's constantly changing, constantly moving. We have to be prepared to adapt with our new needs and our new desires. And I think as a result of that, it can be tricky, to know what you want to do. I think what some people struggle with, and I think is really useful that I processed a little bit during my career, was associating too closely with the job role. So people who take a lot of status from being a rugby player or probably being a doctor to a large degree, I can imagine that's similar. If you wrap up a lot of your self-worth with that job role, obviously when you leave it, it becomes difficult. So I think that kind of status change is something that everyone to a degree has to manage, and I think we're probably doing all right on that. But there's still that. I mean, it's a fundamental part of my psyche, which I do manage, but there, I want to be the best at stuff still. Like, that's why I was part of the reason why I was quite successful in my rugby career. And hopefully it'll be a bit of a reason why I'm successful in the next career, whatever I choose to do, or different things I choose to do. But if it goes unchecked, then it's not that useful. So it's just about, as you said, building that self-awareness and being curious about which parts of our minds are guiding us, and whether we allow them to guide us kind of consciously and deliberately, or whether we're just being taken along for a ride. And I think that's the distinction that is a constant work on.
The identity thing is so interesting, actually. It's something that I've been thinking about more recently, and also how you're introduced, or how you introduce yourself. I'm Tom, I'm the rugby player, I'm Tash, I'm the doctor. And yeah, it's how you kind of want to be known, and how people recognize it. My mum would always go, "Oh, Tash, she's my daughter, the doctor," and bless her, she's proud of me. But actually, is that my identity? Is there other things that make me who I am? And yeah, I can imagine. I mean, yeah, having however many years playing rugby, and even for me being at medical school for 6 years, and even now, being a doctor much less than you were a rugby player for. But yeah, even my identity now feels very heavily linked to that. And I have to remind myself that there are so many other things that make me who I am without being Dr. Tash. Which is difficult. I mean, obviously we spend so much of our lives working. It's challenging, but yeah, I guess when it comes to stepping away, we have to recognize that we're so much more than just our job, I suppose.
I think you're right. And it is, because it's a large portion of our lives, it feels like it's a large portion of ourselves, but that doesn't necessarily ring true. And I think it's a good exercise for everyone to do. And actually, I might do it today, just to take stock. Is literally make a note of every label you think applies to you. So for me, that would be, I guess, ex-rugby player would be on there, because that's, that is a label that either I attach to myself or other people attach to me. Husband, father, like friend, and you can build up the detail on those things as well. Like, list everything you can think of that would be a label that might describe you. And you look down the list and you realize that you could take all of those away and there would still be a you there underlying all of that. And a lot of those labels could be different and there'd still be you underneath all of that. And I think it's a useful exercise, just to do occasionally, just to check in with ourselves that we're not getting too closely aligned to any of that.
That's really nice. I might do that myself as well. I've never done that before. It sounds a good exercise. Yeah.
If you want to make it even more, like dramatic, you can actually use post-it notes and you stick them on you. And then obviously when they fall off, you realize you still live despite the labels falling off. So there you go. That's what I do. If I'm ever doing it in front of an audience, that's the way to do it. You can have that one for free, Tash.
Add that to the next talk when I eventually get invited to another talk.
I'm waiting for my invites to talk. It's all dried up my end as well, so we're in the same boat. Well, I'm just mindful of time, and I want you to go and enjoy some the rest of your day off. So good to chat, and thanks so much for not just sharing today on the YOD pod, but sharing your experience online and on your socials. I think it's really valuable for people to see, not only because they can learn strategies learn from your journey and your experience, but I think learn from your vulnerability and openness and authenticity. And I think that is such a valuable thing in the world, particularly at the moment, and particularly in your profession, perhaps. So thank you for all of that. It's been awesome hearing. I'm looking forward to whatever comes next for you. Definitely get you on the YOD pod again if you'll come back, and particularly get you back on when you're running healthcare policy for the country. I look forward to that'll be a very enjoyable. I feel like I'll be out of my depth then. But you just reminded us some amazing things today. I think the benefits of therapy, not just going when you feel like you really need it, but also going when you just feel like life could be that little bit better. The benefits of sharing and downloading with other people in your community, but also having strategies to keep yourself going. The importance of noticing when you're self-shaming around your emotions. I think it's a really valuable one. And I'm just, it was really, really rewarding. And I'm looking forward to seeing more about Ollie the dog and your long walks. And perhaps when you finally go and bake that banana bread. I don't know where that came from, but I think you've manifested that for the day. So
yeah, I think I have, unfortunately. No, thanks so much for having me on. And I think, no, it's great. And it's always, I think, as a young white woman, I recognize that it's often easier for me to talk about conversations around mental health, but being a male and being in from the sports world and rugby and the sort of masculinity associated with that, I think like more power to you. And I think it's amazing that I think these conversations need to involve a wider body of individuals, and I think especially the conversation around men's mental health. I think it's great that you're hosting this podcast, because having spoken to my boyfriend and other males in my life, it's a lot harder for them on the whole. So thank you for being great role model for other men, and sharing your own vulnerabilities as well. And thanks for having me. It's been such a nice conversation. I feel like I've spoken about myself for enough for the whole week, but it's great. It's very therapeutic, actually. It's been nice, a really nice conversation, a great start to my day. Thanks so much, Tom.
thank you.